In 1981, Chris lives in San Francisco and works as a salesman for portable bone density scanners. Every morning, he drops his son Junior off at daycare and then visits hospitals around the city to try and sell the scanners. They're hard to sell because they're expensive and not really needed. On the bus, Chris sometimes runs into a strange homeless man who calls the scanner a time machine. There are times when Chris has to stay out longer to make a sale, so he asks his wife Linda to pick up Junior. This annoys her because she often works long hours to support the family. One evening, while having dinner, Chris finds a Rubik's Cube, a new trend given to him by one of Linda's friends. Linda asks if he paid the taxes, but Chris plans to file an extension, which frustrates her even more. That night, Chris quickly solves the cube. The next day, while walking around on his sales route, he sees a man getting out of a fancy sports car. Chris asks what the man does, and the man says he's a stockbroker. Chris assumes that you need a college degree for that job, but the man explains that all you need is a good understanding of numbers and people. Seeing how happy the workers at the brokerage firm are, Chris decides he wants that kind of life for himself. The next morning, he tells Linda he'll be late because he plans to apply for a job as a stockbroker. Linda laughs at his idea and calls it unrealistic. Chris gets upset and tells her not to talk to him like that, leading to a heated argument. It ends when Linda reminds him they have 2 months' rent to pay. Later, Chris goes to the brokerage firm to apply. They hire 20 people every 6 months, but only one gets the job. Wanting to look decent, Chris leaves his scanner with a hippie girl singing on the street, giving her some money to watch it. Inside the firm, he learns more about the job and gets an application, but then he notices through the window that the girl is running off with the scanner. Chris grabs the application and rushes out to chase her through the city and the train station. She escapes by jumping onto a train. The next day, Chris promises Linda he'll sell the scanner so they won't have to see it again. First, he heads to the firm to drop off his completed application. He makes sure to hand it directly to the HR manager, Jay, hoping to make a good impression, but Jay is too busy and says he'll call later. As Chris leaves, he spots the hippie girl and her partner walking by with the scanner. Angry, he chases them, revealing that he's spent all his savings on the scanners. He believed the machine would be revolutionary, but he didn't know that doctors and hospitals saw them as unnecessary luxury items. For Chris, losing a scanner feels like losing a month's worth of groceries. After chasing the couple around, he finally corners them on the bus and gets the scanner back. Now, instead of selling it, he has 2. Linda is disappointed, but says nothing because it's Junior's birthday. The couple sacrificed some money to buy him a basketball, hoping to keep him happy. However, while Junior is distracted, Linda tells Chris how angry she is about his lack of responsibility. A month later, Chris visits Jay to check on his job application, but Jay is in a hurry. Chris pretends to be going the same way so they can share a taxi, but Jay doesn't care about Chris's skills. While in the taxi, Jay focuses on his Rubik's Cube, but keeps failing. Frustrated, Chris takes it from him and solves it by the time the taxi reaches Jay's stop. Impressed, Jay leaves, but now Chris has to pay. With no money, Chris gets out at a signal and runs, prompting the taxi driver to chase him. Chris runs into the train station and jumps on a train, but the door slams on his hand, making him drop the scanner. Jay has ruined Chris's plans, and when he calls Linda to apologize, she's furious. She missed her shift to pick up Junior, and they really needed that money. It's the last straw, and she tells Chris she's leaving with Junior. Chris races home, but by the time he gets there, Linda and their son are gone. Just then, Chris gets a call from Jay, who gives him the number of his secretary to set up an interview for tomorrow. Chris can't find a single pen, so he tries to remember the number and rushes to a nearby store to write it down. The next morning, he goes to daycare and talks to Linda about what happened. Linda says she's not happy anymore, and while Chris understands her decision to leave, he won't let her take Junior. They agree to take turns with the child. Without Linda's income, things get worse financially. When the landlord finally gets fed up with Chris not paying rent, he tells him to leave in the morning because painters are coming. Chris promises he'll pay soon and offers to do the painting himself, so the landlord gives him another week. A few days later, while Chris is painting, the police show up and take him to the station to pay for his parking tickets. The officer tells him they'll verify the tickets at 9:30 a.m., so Chris has to spend the night in jail. He tries to explain that he has an interview the next morning, but it doesn't matter. With his one phone call, Chris asks Linda to pick up Junior. The next morning, Chris is released, but he's nearly late for the interview. He runs there in his worn clothes. At the firm, the interview panel is disappointed with his appearance, but Chris explains the situation. Jay, who had seen him dressed properly before, backs him up. Chris uses his wit and charm, making a great impression. After the interview, Jay congratulates Chris, but Chris says he needs to think about it because he found out the internship has no salary, and his situation has changed. Jay encourages him to take the opportunity and promises to save his spot, saying he'll call later in the evening. That evening, Linda arrives with Junior and drops surprising news. She's moving to New York because her sister's boyfriend is opening a restaurant, and she might work there. Chris says he's going to take the job, but she can't take care of him. Inspired by Linda's decision to follow her own path, Chris tells her about the internship. This upsets her, and she leaves. After she's gone, Chris calls Jay and accepts the job. The next day, Chris and Junior move into a nearby motel with the help of a friend. Since it's Saturday, Chris takes Junior to play basketball, and Junior talks about becoming a pro. Chris explains that it's tough for most people to make it, but when Junior gets discouraged, Chris tells him to never let anyone, even him, tell him he can't do something. Later, they go to the hospital to sell the scanner, finally making a sale that will keep them going for a few more days. The next morning, Chris starts his first day at the internship, learning about the work. He works hard to show he's the best for the role, keeping his financial struggles to himself. During lunch, Chris sees his boss, Mr. Frome, on the street and tries to start a conversation, hoping to impress him. But he stops when he sees the crazy man holding the scanner, still believing it's a time machine. Chris runs after him, dodging traffic, but ends up getting hit by a car. He loses track of the man and one of his shoes, so he heads back to the office, trying to act calm. Over the next few days, Chris does small jobs for the office manager to earn some cash and continues calling clients, but without success. Things get worse as he has to leave early to pick up Junior, which means he has to do the same amount of work as everyone else in less time. This leads Chris to never hang up the phone, never drink water, and skip bathroom breaks. He avoids the motel manager because he owes him money and takes Junior with him to the hospitals on weekends to try selling his last scanners. One day, Chris decides to change his routine to speed things up and makes a bold call to Mr. Ribbon, a top pension fund manager. He manages to get an appointment in 20 minutes. Chris rushes out of the office, but Frikesh stops him and asks him to move his car. With no time to waste, Chris tries to park as fast as possible, but by the time he gets to the meeting, Ribbon is already gone. The next morning, Chris visits Ribbon's house, pretending to be in the area. He thanks Ribbon again for the opportunity and apologizes once more. Then, he casually mentions taking Junior to a football game. Ribbon tells him he's going with his son too, and invites Chris and Junior to join them in his private box. At the game, Chris tries to pitch his sales idea to Ribbon, but despite Ribbon saying he likes Chris, he's not interested. However, Chris gets the business cards of Ribbon's wealthy friends, who seem more open to his offer. Weeks go by with Chris juggling his internship and trying to sell the scanners, but things take a turn when the IRS takes money from Chris's bank account for unpaid taxes, leaving him broke. Desperate, Chris tries to ask an old friend for the money he lent him, but the friend claims he already paid it back when he helped him move. Chris gets angry, but his friend just shuts the door in his face. Later, Chris takes Junior to the park and spots the crazy man with the scanner again. He chases him down and retrieves the machine, but it's in bad condition. Chris cleans it up and tries to sell it to a doctor, but the machine doesn't work. When Chris and Junior return to the motel, they find their belongings outside, and the lock has been changed due to unpaid rent. Chris tries to pick the lock and open the window, but nothing works, leaving them homeless. His friend still won't open the door, so Chris takes Junior to the train station. While they wait for the train, Junior says the scanner isn't a time machine like the crazy man claimed. Chris insists that it is, and decides to cheer Junior up by pretending they can travel through time and see dinosaurs. He then says that good cavemen need a cave, so they sneak into the station's bathroom and lock themselves in. Later, they realize the train station is closed. With no other option, they spend the night there, using toilet paper as a blanket. While Junior sleeps, Chris allows himself to cry. The next morning, they go to a homeless shelter, but are turned away because it's only for women and children. However, they get a tip about another shelter and run as fast as they can since the line is long and spots are limited. They reach the entrance just in time, with only 4 spots left. A homeless man tries to cut in, but Chris fights him off. When security hears what happened, Chris gets the last room. At the shelter, Chris uses the little light available to try fixing the scanner and study for his internship exam. Every day, he brings his few belongings to work and makes up excuses to his co-workers about why he's carrying bags. In the following days, Chris manages to bring in a few clients to the firm using the business cards he had collected earlier. Each new client feels like a small victory, and Chris begins to see a glimmer of hope for his future. On the day of his internship exam, he is nervous but pushes through and finishes the test quickly, despite his anxiety. As he leaves the building, he bumps into Mr. Frome, who has just gotten out of a taxi. In a hurry, Frome asks Chris to lend him $5 to cover the fare. Even though Chris can barely afford it, he doesn't want to seem unhelpful and agrees, hoping it won't be a problem. The small delay causes him to miss the shelter's deadline, so he and Junior end up spending the night on a train. The next day, Chris donates blood to make a little extra cash, which he uses to buy a part to fix the broken scanner. This time, they manage to reach the shelter on time, and Chris spends the night fixing the scanner. Later that evening, as they're getting ready for bed, Junior asks a heart-wrenching question. He wonders if his mother left because of him. Chris, feeling deeply for his son, reassures him and promises that it wasn't his fault, trying to lift his spirits. The next morning, they successfully sell the scanner, and Chris, wanting to do something special for Junior, surprises him with a night at a hotel to make up for all the hardship they've endured. The following weekend, they spend a relaxing day at the beach together, bonding and enjoying some time away from their struggles. It's a brief but much-needed break. On Chris's last day as an intern, he runs into Jay in the washroom. Jay congratulates him on bringing in several new clients and praises him for his hard work. Later, Chris is called into Mr. Frome's office, where he learns he has secured the permanent position he has been hoping for. Frome hands Chris the $5 he had borrowed earlier and tells him he's starting his new role the next day. As Chris leaves the building, his emotions overwhelm him and tears well up in his eyes. He walks out, thinking about how much he's overcome and how far he's come. He picks up Junior, gives him a tight hug, and feels a sense of excitement and pride for the new life they are about to begin together. In the years that follow, Chris goes on to start his own multi-million-dollar brokerage firm, making millions by selling a minority stake in the company. He also writes a best-selling book that details his incredible journey, inspiring countless others with his story of perseverance and success.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.